Tragic.
Pain.
Sadness.
Tragic.
Sad.
Genocide.
Injustice.
Pointless.
My name is Amina Malic. I'm 21 years old. I am from Srebrenica in Bosnia, and I am a business management major.
Hi, my name is Alana Rapovic. I am from Blaga Japra, smaller city by Bosanski Novi, bio major here at Loyola.
I'm Marisa Klaric. I'm from, well, my family is from Opličići. I'm a criminal justice major, and I'm 20 years old.
My name is Amar. I'm a psychology major and neuroscience minor. I'm 21, and I'm actually mixed. I'm half Bosnian and half Iraqi.
My name is Amilo Amirovic. I'm 19 years old. My family's from Skelani. It's a little village that's part of Srebrenica in the eastern region of Bosnia. I'm currently a sophomore at Loyola University, and I am a biology major.
Hi, my name is Layla, and I'm 18, and I'm from Sarajevo.
My name is Edwin Mamic. I'm 20 years old. I go to DePaul University, and my major is information systems, and my parents are from Kozarec.
My name is Jasmina Basic. I'm 21 years old, and when I was at Loyola, I studied English and marketing. I am from Kozarec in Bosna.
So my name is Melissa. In Bosnia, I am from Gornji Vakuf. I'm 21, and at Loyola, I'm studying psychology with a minor in neuroscience.
My name is Yasmin Mihinovic. I'm 22 years old. My major is finance, minor in management. I'm from Srebrenica.
Studying political science and history, and my family and I are from Montenegro.
Hi, my name is Vicky Saliu. I'm a junior here at Loyola University. I'm an English major and a psychology and crime minor, and my parents are from Bosanski Novi Bosna and Tetovo, Macedonia.
I did not see any possibilities of war. Bosnia was a republic that had citizens that were Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian. When attacks happened in different republics, everyone said it was impossible that the conflict would reach Bosnia. We were known to be accepting people, and I chose to be in denial that it would ever reach us.
When I asked my mom if she saw the possibility of war, she honestly said no, because back when the entire Balkan region was under Yugoslavia, everyone was really happy. There were so many jobs.
My mom did not see any possibilities of war. She heard people talking about it, but she didn't believe it until the day it started. Then right after it started, she saw her neighbors armed and forced her family out of her house.
My dad did not see a possibility of war anytime soon at the time because everyone was together, everyone treated each other equally, and there was no thought of hate in other people.
I think hatred was the reason for war, and I think it was greed.
It just stems from religious intolerance, but I feel like it's such a broad question with so many answers that there's no way to explain it in this one sitting.
I think just like Serbians wanting to take over the land and control the most that they can get. And there'd be only a greater Serbia and no other people, no Muslims, Catholics, etc.
Ethnic cleansing and the gaining of land.
The real reason is that after Tito died in 1980, Yugoslavia's treasury was completely empty. So for the more Western countries like Slovenia and Croatia, they needed money in their government and their state, for funding, for all of that. So the only way that they were going to get it was through the International Monetary Fund, and the only way that that would happen is if Slovenia and Croatia denounced their communist political system and separated from Yugoslavia. Serbia didn't want that to happen. They wanted them to remain in Yugoslavia. So 10 years later, we saw what would happen in 91 to 95.
Scared, didn't know what to do other than run for your life.
My mom says she felt really confused. Like I said, she didn't expect a war to happen, and you see it on films, but when it happens in real life, you're just worried. You're not sure what's happening. You're not sure how long is it going to go on? Is it just a temporary situation? So I guess one word that sums it up is just confusion.
Since Srebrenica was freed, all the surrounding cities came to Srebrenica, the ones that were attacked. So families of 10, 12 would come in and live in one home, and everything that you had to be shared with these families that didn't have a home that came to live with you. So food was very scarce, and it was a matter of survival.
My mom was there from the first day of the war to the last day of the war. In the war, she saw poverty, lots of blood, and dismembered human bodies. Things were 100 times worse than in movies. Food was very scarce, and what was available was usually very expensive.
Dad said there was nothing, no water, clean water especially. There were no doctors or medical help at the time.
My mom told me she went 20 days without food. The army would pass out these little tablets that were meant to suppress your hunger for about 24 hours. So yeah, they kind of did their job, but it's really different having to go to sleep hungry every night and not have access to clean water, and the only shelter you had was your house that was being bombed and shelled every day, in and out for months.
My dad was in a concentration camp. Everyone was close together. They were fed once a day with a soup, so-called. Maybe an ounce. It was mostly just water a day. He spent 47 days in the concentration camp. He lost over 20 kilograms in the 47 days. The only thoughts going through his head were not being killed or not knowing if you're going to be killed that day or that night, and there were just a lot of beatings going on.
So for the first few days, my mom talked about not having some food, and then after that, they only had a little bit of bread, which was saved for little kids. And after that, they had nothing, and they would have to they had to survive on leaves and such. There wasn't clean water because the Serbs cut the water lines. So once her and her family were dragged out of the house, they were taken to a nearby village where 45 to 50 people were crammed in one house, and that's what conditions she had to live in for 3 weeks.
I myself was born after the war in Germany, but my dad has told me plenty of stories while I talked to him about what it was like being a soldier during the war. He was 19 years old. His commander was Nasser Oric. He was a pretty inexperienced soldier. He said that the Bosnian army consisted of young men who didn't have a lot of experience, didn't have the best quality of uniforms, boots, artillery. We were really at a disadvantage compared to the Serbian forces. My dad, the way he described it is, it was more like a 12-year-old boy fighting Mike Tyson. That's how unfair the enemy lines were. With that, there came a lot of struggle in battle, and also there were a lot of times when there weren't enough resources, not just when it came to war stuff like weapons and uniforms and stuff, but with food and shelter. They'd have to live in abandoned homes in the cold. They'd be in freezing temperatures, and they'd go weeks without food, and being scourging through the forest to find shelter, and yeah, just not a fun time.
I think of betrayal when I think of the war, because it's important to remember that it wasn't just Serbian forces that came in and did everything that they did. It was also Serbian neighbors that would kill you, burn your house down, take all of your belongings, and those are the same people that you drink coffee with every morning or said hi to on your way to school, and it's disgusting.
She never expected that her neighbors would turn on her, or that people who were with her in elementary school would be her enemies. What else do you call it when neighbors turn on neighbors? And like I said, these were generations of people that got along together, and all of a sudden that meant nothing to them. And it's just sad that people can dehumanize one another so quickly.
People being our neighbors and sharing the same bread at the bakery, and coming over for coffee, to them burning down our houses.
Once they stopped, all of the males were taken, 16 and older, and they were put in a separate cargo train, and they just took them without notice. No one knew where they went or what had happened to them. My mom's dad was taken, so my grandfather, and after 2 months they found out where he was. So my grandfather was taken to a concentration camp. He was locked up with no food and no clothes. Lots of the people with him were killed. Finally, NATO came and let them free, and he was able to go to Germany.
My father and my grandfather decided that they would flee through the woods, as they would call it, because they knew if they went into Potečare, which was where all the women and children were getting separated, that they would be separated from the women and children, and it was for sure that they were going to get killed. So they decided to go through the woods at a chance of survival, and unfortunately neither of them came back.
My mother was separated from her dad for 2 years, while my stepfather was separated from his family in increments. Sometimes it would be 2 months, sometimes 1 month, a few weeks, and so on.
Men from the age of 13 all the way up to 80 plus were taken into camps, while kids and women under the age of 13 were loaded into buses and driven off. Nobody knew where they were going. My father was separated for the 47 days he spent in the camp, and then after leaving camp, it was another 2 days before he got into Croatia, where he was reunited with his mother.
Both of them did see people getting killed. For my mom, she saw a person that was from the next village being killed in front of her house. And as for my stepfather, he fought in the war, so he did see people being killed, but men being killed the most, and young girls being kidnapped for sexual reasons.
Luckily, my mother didn't really see anyone murdered in front of her, but the neighborhood we lived in, everyone would kind of make makeshift nursing stations within the basements, whoever had supplies at that time, because they were really limited. So she did see a lot of people that were injured and that unfortunately did pass away, but did she see anyone actually shot in front of her? Thankfully no, because I feel like that's something you can never get over.
So my stepfather talked about a grenade falling right by his book bag right next to him, killing his friend right in front of him. He wasn't hurt, but seeing his friend being killed right there was very detrimental.
I think it's easier to say who I didn't lose. Do you want me to just name like immediate family, or?
Whatever you feel comfortable.
My father, my grandfather, my mom's brother, my grandma's brother, my other grandma's brother. I mean, half the family's gone.
My mom was hurt in the bombing known as the Markala Massacre of '95, and she lost her friend. My mom lost lots of family. For example, her grandma, many uncles and cousins, as well as friends.
But some of my mom's cousins, they did pass through the camps, or in like the mass graves and stuff like that, just the random killings.
My mom's mom died in the war.
My father lost 3 uncles, 2 brother-in-laws, and friends.
My mother lost her grandfather and uncle and 16 other cousins. They were all killed within 2 hours. My stepfather, however, didn't lose any family members, but did lose friends in the war.
As cousins, I lost my grandfather. The remains of my grandfather have yet to be found, so we don't know nothing about him, where he is.
Again, thankfully, we were one of the lucky people that didn't lose, the entire male populace of our family. We did lose a lot of cousins, a lot of family members. Like I said, one of my great uncles, we never figured out what happened to him. He just kind of vanished off the face of the earth. We assumed that he's probably in a mass grave, or as they did before, they would just take people to the forest, and no one figured out what happened to him.
My dad's side of the family, they are the ones that are originally from Srebrenica, so his side of the family experienced the most loss. My grandma on my dad's side lost multiple brothers, I believe 4 brothers. Dad has lost a lot of childhood friends. He's actually seen them die right before his eyes, and to commemorate their lives and their friendships, he actually has tattoos carved by a knife with their initials on him. And I always was wondering what they were when I was little, but I never had the courage to ask. So when I grew older, I actually asked him what they stood for, and he said they were the names of his best friends. So I think that's pretty remarkable.
Just there was a lot of family in general. Pretty much my dad's whole neighborhood in Bosnia was kind of eliminated. Not many people survived there. He would tell us stories about how some neighbors, the dad would be like forced out of the home and have to choose between his kids, like which one to kill. And so he chose for all of them to die.
The sense of security. You lived in this community for so long, for generations. You know, your neighbors weren't your faith, but you guys got along. And, you know, just having all of that stripped away from you in like a second. And, you know, it was just really, really hard for them to accept the fact that they weren't safe in their own country, in their own homes, not even in their own minds anymore with like post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's just, the sense of safety is completely gone.
You lost everything. Our home was destroyed. Our family is gone. You lose who you are, a sense of identity. Everything that matters to you, really everything that makes you who you are.
He did not think of an end. He could only dream of an end. Sometimes in the future, the only things going through his mind were getting out of the camp into freedom.
Being the child she was at that time, she thought it would be over really quickly, and unfortunately that was not the situation.
She didn't really think about an end to the war. She was just happy that she survived each day.
My stepfather was in the war for 5 years. My mom was there only for a few months and was lucky enough to escape to Slovenia.
The Red Cross, they negotiated with the Serbs at the concentration camps in order to get people out of there. Father couldn't believe that he was free at the time when he got out. He still felt like he was trapped. He didn't have a feeling of freedom yet at the time, but he was still sympathetic for the people that stayed and died.
So my parents, although they were just a few kilometers apart in Bosnia, they didn't meet until they were refugees in Czech Republic. My dad had served in the Bosnian War driving a tank, and then his family fled to Czech Republic, and that's where they met my mom's family. There was kind of this one central building in Czech Republic where all the refugees were. And so they met there, they married, they had me, and when I was 6 months old, we began the process of coming to America.
My mom was hiding, and after 3 weeks in another village where she was crammed with 50 other people, she was taken with a bunch of other people in cargo trains, and they traveled for 3 days not knowing where they were being taken. For my mom, she was and her family, they were taken to Croatia, to a camp for refugees. They were kept there for a few days until their aunt or my grandfather's sister contacted them and came to pick them up. She lives in Slovenia and picked them up and took them to her home.
During the war, I was in Germany. That's where I was born. That's where my parents were. They fled right before the outbreak of the war.
Well, we all had to evacuate Srebrenica, so the men and the women were separated, and all the women were evacuated out, and the men were taken separately to be killed. We came to America through my aunt who sent us papers. I remember my mom telling me that they were taken off of the bus that was taking them to the free zone, and she had to sleep under like a tank or something like that, or under a car of the UN in order to ensure that neither of us were killed from the shelling. And she remembers that when she crossed into the border, the Serbian soldiers were like screaming at her and yelling at her like, "Don't turn around, don't look anywhere." And I'm sure it was a sense of relief knowing that she would see people that were her own and that didn't mean any harm.
My grandma was the first one to escape Srebrenica with the bus, and my mom and dad met in Tuzla and they got married there, and they tried to escape the war, but it was really hard finding transportation to leave. But eventually my grandma, with financial aid, helped them leave Bosna and get to Germany with her. We lived there for 2 years until getting approval by the immigration office. We actually had options to which country we could go to. We had Australia or America, and my dad picked America. How different it would be if I lived in Australia. I'd have like a different accent and like be living a completely different life.
My mom would say that she is always scared that she might lose her friends and therefore gets even more attached to people. For my stepfather, he would like it to be just like the old Yugoslavia, and where the brotherhood was strong and there was equality for all, and that there wasn't hate based on religion.
I think the long-term effects have to do a lot with like pain and trying to resolve a lot of the conflict that they have, not just like with other people, but within themselves, because they went through a lot of stuff that none of us can really understand, and they're still dealing with a lot of those memories. So I think it's important to like step into their shoes a lot of the times when they're like angry or upset and you're trying to understand why, just to remember.
Whenever anybody gets together, the first topic is war. You always, time is measured before the war, during the war, and after the war. You always talk about this. There's always this empty feeling, and it's wounds that are never going to heal.
I think the war impacts a lot of my views, just because it makes me have a lot more empathy for what people are going through, and I can kind of relate to a lot of the things that refugees currently are going through, just because my family was there, and I think the experiences that they had, helped me to understand people a lot better and how wars really affect people.
My mom would sometimes dream about finding her uncle who was killed in the war. My stepfather, he always has nightmares because he fought in the war. He dreams about his freedom being taken away and all the killings and murders that were going on.
Nightmares, just kind of like, I remember we were walking through some I think it was the 4th of July, and an unexpected firework came out of the air, and my sister dropped to the ground, and I was just it's hard to see, but the effects are still there,
But if they were to talk about the war, you can notice the difference in how they speak, where they stop, how they think about these events, and it just plays back in their mind like a movie probably. I know my grandfather lost his son, so when he sees little boys, he'll always be like, take care of them, make sure that you give them whatever they want. And I feel like he has this yearning for his son, and he probably has survival's guilt, the fact that he survived and his son didn't.
One of the main things my dad has taught me is don't succumb to your frustration or your stresses in life, because there's so many people that are trying so hard to find food and even have fresh water.
A big chaotic event where idiotic people did stupid things. It's one of the worst things that people could do to each other. Described more as when humans turn into animals.
Time goes on, we just develop as a nation, and the people who are from that nation spread out through the world and just better themselves, regardless of what had happened.
I mean, that's where your parents are from, but it's not like their hometown anymore. It's a changed world, and it's usually just during the summer. That's where most of the people are. But after summer leaves, there's nothing to the city anymore. It's like a ghost town.
The war to me means, again, having a sense of responsibility. Not only a responsibility in remembering what happened and educating the public, but responsibility personally. So whatever I do, I try to excel in it, because I don't want our country to be known as people who are just refugees. We have people who are going to become doctors, we have people who will become poets. We're going to be a nation that hopefully one day is thriving.
You don't look people at what they are, their race, religion, etc., skin color. As long as they are human, he respects them as humans. And the world isn't the same anymore.
For my stepfather, he would like it to be just like the old Yugoslavia, and where the brotherhood was strong and there was equality for all, and that there wasn't hate based on religion.
I always say that the one positive thing that came from the war is that I have family all over now, and it gives us plenty of reason to travel. I've had the opportunity to go to multiple different European nations and so many states within the US because we have family there and there's always some place to stay. But I think the war, it's obviously meant opportunity to me. I wouldn't be here and have had the education I have if it weren't for the war. But there's just so much hardship and turmoil that you've had to deal with, and hearing the stories from the family that, you know, obviously it would not have been the ideal choice.
The most recent cases that happened was the 40-year sentence of Radovan Karadzic, who was the leader of the Serbian entity in Bosnia. And he did create a lot of crimes with the help of the army leader Ratko Mladic. And so, for me, I think it's a blessing that he was sentenced for 40 years.
His sentencing was short. There's not a long enough or big enough punishment to punish him for what he has done to all the men, women, and children.
For the sentencing of Radovan Karadzic, it is sad and disappointing. For the number of lives taken by the war, the sentencing is nothing. If they just took into consideration the hunger people went through, that wouldn't be enough. On the other hand, I am happy that he has been sentenced so that people can be aware of the things he has done and to finally bring justice and peace to the people who have suffered and lost their loved ones.
I have mixed views about it. I'm happy that he was found guilty for the genocide in Srebrenica, but he wasn't found guilty for the genocide in every other part of Bosnia, which is ridiculous. I think 40 years is not enough. But looking at that fact, I really wasn't expecting him to get a life sentence. So at the age that he is right now, 40 years is a life sentence for him. I guess it's a matter of take what you can get. And yeah, there's really nothing we can do about it. It's sad and unfortunate.
From an outside perspective, I don't see how anyone could see that and see the video footage and just not accept what happened and only give genocide for one area of Bosnia.
Being responsible for killing that many people, come on, in the US you kill one person, you're sentenced to life. This man only gets 40 years.
You should definitely get more than what he got, which was only about 40 years. And it's just very sad that it took 20 years for him to go on trial, and then they just kind of tossed it to the side because, of course, you know, he was at one point a very important political official, and they get special treatment, which isn't right, because if you're a person and you commit a crime against another person, it shouldn't matter who you are, you should still get the same sentencing.
I think that that's a little lenient. Even though a lot of people say, you know, he's going to still die in prison, it's kind of just like a symbolic thing. I think it's good that he got sentenced, and especially that it was for genocide. Just kind of recognizing that that's what happened.
I think the amount of time it took to sentence him, and the fact that it was only a 40-year sentence for connections to so many murders, it's disparaging to a lot of people who know the impact of what his actions resulted in, and it might make some people feel like their families might not have mattered when such a minimal sentence was given, but it's always still a sense of some relief to know that he'll be put behind bars.
It's an absolute joke. People in America get a worse sentencing for having illegal narcotics on them, or like a friend said, you get, for one life here, you get 25 to life. So I believe the number was 9,000. He should have served 9,000 years for all the people that he directly influenced the slaughter of. But unfortunately, I don't think justice was served. It took over 20 years for them to even hear his case and prosecute him. I'm glad that he'll probably die in prison, but you know, if there's an afterlife, I feel like that's where his judgment will come, and 40 years here may be a little bit, but you know, in the afterlife he has a lot to be held accountable for.
And I know people are saying he's 70 years old, he's gonna die in jail, so it doesn't matter anyways, but that's not the point. The point is how do you measure someone's pain?
The other case of Vojislav Šešelj, who was released for health reasons out of The Hague and back into Serbia, and he was a very big nationalist. He supported the idea of Greater Serbia. He wanted to annex all of Montenegro, all of Bosnia, and 80% of Croatia. So he had the idea, with the help of Arkan and the White Eagles, to create the Serbian entity. He was a leading proponent in the genocides, war crimes, rapes on women, and you know, that's just injustice for him to be acquitted of all his 5 counts that were set in the Hague.
I think it's disgusting. I think it shows the world that you can do whatever you want, and if the victims are Muslim, it's okay. And it shows the Serbians that they're not responsible for what happened, and that it's okay for them that they did this, and it just creates problems for future generations.
Both of the verdicts are not fair according to my mom and my stepfather and myself. There is no justice for all the victims that were killed in the war.
40 years, but considering that he just got released on nothing, and now he makes the same statements over and over again, and considering that that he's made statements to support Trump as well, considering that Trump is anti-Muslim, is very ridiculous as well. I mean, considering that all these new trials that have come out, and it's just a repeat of like the world just seeing other people being tortured, but no end result to the people that are the torturers.
And he's like, well, what if I told you that everyone you're sitting with right now is Muslim? And they all kind of just looked at him and they were just like, I don't believe it. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, because you guys are all white and we thought you were Italian. He's like, well, no, we're Bosnian and everyone's Muslim. And the people, they just got up, took their drinks, and they just left.
One thing I've learned from being a white Muslim is that white privilege is extremely real. It does exist.
Next thought is, oh my God, if I'm riding the train this morning and there's, a woman or a man who looks like an Arab, like they're obviously going to be I'm afraid for them, like as targets, and I get away with that a lot just because I'm white.
The most important thing is to teach people what Islam is really about, the correct beliefs and not the killings and the fighting that people automatically think of when Islam is mentioned.
My heart goes out to like every girl who wears a hijab.
Use it as a way to educate people, showing them that you don't have to be wearing a hijab or brown or from India or whatever people think to be Muslim, and that we're not all the same, and just to reinforce that Islam is a religion of peace, and that just because certain people go do things doesn't mean that we're all the same.
Go to certain places, people kind of look at me twice. They're like, like there's a brown guy, you know what I mean? But if it was like a white, like a Bosnian Muslim, like fully Bosnian, it's like, oh, okay, just another white person, whatever.
Just leave the terrorist jokes. They're unnecessary, they're not funny. They're really offensive. People are actually dying.
I don't like how Muslims are being portrayed in the media. The 0.1% that they do portray as terrorists reflects the 100% of Muslims.
I was raised here. I moved here when I was 2, and I feel like I'm very American. But the thing is, people, they believe whatever they see on like TV.
People really trash Islam or like Muslim people, not realizing that my family is the people they're like bad-mouthing. And I'll just kind of look to and be like, hi, let me clarify something for you. And I think it takes them by surprise.
It's just constant injustice for like people. It's always been with it's been with African Americans, it's been with the Jews, and now it's with Muslims, and it's just a typical media thing. It's people that can't really think for themselves. They just accept whatever's on media and just go with it.
With the current election going on with Donald Trump and all these Islamophobic remarks and anti-Muslim bigotry, like people just blithely assume that these things don't come with consequences, and I think like the Srebrenica genocide is one of the biggest examples.
I think one thing that I've realized is that Muslims sometimes feel the need to apologize and assert that they're not part of this problem, when really it's not on us to apologize for the actions of extremists. You don't see the same sort of sense of burden across the Caucasian population when one mentally unstable kid goes in a movie theater and commits a mass murder. But Muslims, whenever something comes up, we feel the need to post about it. We feel the need to say, this is not Islam. To feel the need to assert that we are not like them, when that shouldn't be assumed by anybody.
Most definitely. What happened to us, I don't wish upon anyone, no matter what race, religion, ethnicity. And I think it's important that we look at what happened in Bosnia, looking at the fact that it is the second biggest genocide since the Holocaust, so that it doesn't happen anywhere else. Although I know that there has been occurrences in other parts of the world it's really important to remember history so it doesn't repeat itself.
Now, when my mom hears about refugees, it makes her heart break because she knows how it feels to lose everything and how painful it is to start all over.
War, the Syrian refugees and everything that's going on, it just makes you feel bad for those people because at one point in time, your people were going through the same thing. You were getting kicked out of your own country, people were invading, and so you can just really feel for the nation, for the people of the other nation.
Made me an open-minded person, which I feel like it may confuse a lot of people because you would expect that war and witnessing and hearing about hatred all the time would make you prejudiced against people, but I feel like I have a responsibility to be open-minded, to accept people for what they are, that atrocities like what happened in our country don't happen elsewhere.
It's a hard balance, I think, the forgiveness, but then trying to remember everything that did happen and honoring the memories. So I think I definitely learned to sympathize with everybody who's been through similar genocides and all, but it's always hard to forgive those who have any kind of tie to the people who enacted all the horrors.
You just learn a lot about empathy, and like you just try your best to like be informed and
And have had the education I have if it weren't for the war, but there's just so much hardship and turmoil that you've had to deal with in hearing the stories from the family that, you know, obviously it would not have been the ideal choice.
In the beginning, my mother felt lost, but a bit more welcome than she did in her own country because she felt accepted. She was able to get a job, make friends, and start a new life.
Well, when I first came to America, I didn't live in Chicago, so that's a huge difference. I moved to St. Louis, and I feel like in the Bosnian community, people have separated more, and we aren't as close, and we don't really get along as well as we should, and we don't help each other as much as we necessarily should. And I feel like when we first came to America, everyone was just ready to help each other in any way possible, to find a job, to find a home, give furniture, whatever was needed, really.
My parents didn't know much people, so it was just hard.
And that support system is no longer here, and you're not on your home soil, and it could be really hard making that transition and adjusting to American living. And so economically, as the years went by, it just got better and better. More doors opened up, more opportunities, and you just got to grasp them.
we made things work. My dad worked construction and my mom was a waitress at different restaurants. My grandma would babysit for money, and so that's kind of how we first started gathering resources and money to like survive and live an adequate life in America.
We were dirt poor. I remember like 20 of us trying to live in one apartment. It was awful. My parents worked 3 jobs each. I remember trying my best to learn English, but it was so hard because I was so timid. I didn't really understand like the American customs. So it was really hard for us to adapt and assimilate. But once we did, I feel like it was a really steep step upward. Thankfully, now we're in the position where I'm able to afford college. I'm able to maybe continue going to graduate school. We're getting a house. So we are just finally, after about 17 years, experiencing the American dream.
Being Bosnian to my dad means more than just being Bosnian. It is culture, it's a tradition, something that's carried on, especially with all the tragic events that happened to Bosnia.
Being Bosnian means persevering through any hardship, to see the things that my family's gone through and coming to America and just seeing that it's kind of typical of the Bosnian history, but that Bosnians still have so much pride in their nationality and their culture. That's what being Bosnian means to me.
And with this identity, I carry my rich culture and tradition.
So there's a sense of pride that comes along with it.
And I take pride in being Bosnian. My parents are from there, both of them. My roots come from Bosnia.
When I associate Bosnia, I always put it with pride. I'm very prideful of who I am and where I come from. And given our history and everything that's happened to us, I think being Bosnian means that you need to be proud of who you are and remember the history and everything that happened to our people so that it doesn't happen to future generations.
I feel being Bosnian means having a sense of responsibility. It's not just being responsible for what happened and making sure that doesn't get lost throughout history, but also being responsible in the sense that we create a new vision of what people from Bosnia are like. We don't want to be known as the people who are just refugees. You know, I want us to be known as people who become doctors, become poets, become people who are influential in the world. So
I think of family, I think of food, I think of just like happiness and like being together. And I think being Bosnian, it's just like no matter where you're from in Bosna, everyone's like, oh, you're Bosnian, like tell me your history, tell me who you are. And I think that connection is alive.
Is having tough blood. We're people that have struggled through a lot. We've endured one of mankind's worst tragedies. We've been through a genocide and a war, and still today you see our people like having a successful life, opening businesses, being happy. And I think we have merhamet, which means like compassion, and we really care about family and core values, and we're just kind people.
I think a question of upcoming war in Bosnia is always kind of up in the air. The situations are still not great. Economically, just a few years ago, Bosnia had the highest rate of youth unemployment throughout the world. And just the way the political system is set up with the rotating presidency between like a Bosnian, a Croatian Bosnian, and a Serbian Bosnian, there's still a lot of conflict. And I think kind of cyclically, historically, it's been a war every so many years. And I think it's still really possible that it might.
My grandma lives back home, and from everything that I've seen, they're getting death threats, and there's no stability over there. Most definitely there will be war.
Most definitely, considering that the tension in that side of the world is just due to the politics and all that, it just doesn't look good for the future.
People need to learn to love each other, and humans must be humane towards each other, not treat each other like animals, respect each other, not categorize each other.
I think one thing that's really important for families to do is to speak about the stories, but not for the purpose of promoting hatred toward Serbians or other people who are anti-Muslim, but trying to foster that understanding that people, when they don't understand a situation or when they're faced with certain hardships, they might choose an easy solution like blaming it on one group.
My stepfather and mother said that the most important thing is not to hate others, but to just keep in mind what happened, to get educated and not to judge by religion, and to just accept everyone as they are.
As of now, there's no way you can bring peace unless the truth comes out and people acknowledge of what they did, and all the criminals must be punished for what they have done.
I was talking to my sister just now, and she's like, all we want is peace. And so I think that's like the overwhelming message.
I think that looking at the Bosnian side, we have to remember what happened and make sure that we don't forget who we are, where we come from, what happened to our people. Looking at the Serbian side, I think it's important to accept it. I noticed that a lot of people say, you know, forgive and forget, or it was such a long time ago, why do you even bring it up anymore? And you have to bring it up, because if we just brush it over and make it seem like it never happened, it's going to happen again, and the same things are going to happen again. And from the Serbian side, they have to accept what they did, and you know, nobody's asking for them to give us our world back, to give us our homes back. You know, the dead, they're gone, they're never going to come back. But it's a matter of saying, yes, we did this, we're sorry, and we were wrong, we shouldn't have done what we did. And that's something you rarely get.
Never forget. Just keep reminding everyone what happened. Never forget what happened in Bosnia. Let it be written in history so future generations can know what happened, and so history doesn't repeat itself.
Keep teaching it, and if you keep teaching the culture and the language to the youth, they have that upbringing of, they know who they are, a sense of identity. And so if you know who you are and if you share that, then I don't think, you know, it'll happen again.
It's not the future generation's fault, so we might as well just work together and try to bring peace to that side of the world again.
Learning from like troubled past and like moving on to have a better future, because it's something in life that you cannot forget. Like if your family has endured this kind of tragedy, you're going to remember this for like generations and generations, and it's going to be passed on as something really important, because you learn like the strength of man and like the real struggle, like the importance to survive.
You can't have peace with people that aren't willing to take responsibility for their actions or have the correct consequences for it.
That's why I'm kind of more proud of our generation, because we're becoming more unified in the sense that we're realizing that you can't fight fire with fire.
It'd be the best for that side of the world to accept what happened during 1992-95.
I think the main thing we can do is, I wouldn't say strive to get over it, but strive to rise above it. Of course, we want to keep the memory alive, but we can't keep the memory alive through hatred. We have to come to a resolution in some way.
It's really important that we retell the history of it, just because after World War II and the Holocaust, everyone's like, this is never going to happen again. Well, it happened, and it was in Europe, and you know, a lot of lives were lost, and it impacted a lot of people. And I think our job, like our current generation and generations to come, is to retell our stories.